And this has been my kitchen.
And welcome to another episode of Cooking with SonicBlu. SonicBlu Darkfield here. And we just have the ingredients necessary to make an awesome casserole. This recipe was sent in by Miss Prissy from Experience Project. And here's all you really need. Just a skillet, medium-sized pan, and all those ingredients we saw in the opening. Now what we're going to do is add some salt to this boiling water. And what that's going to do is it's going to help break down all of that starchy material that gets leached up into the water as it boils our noodles. So now it's ready to go. We just need to wait for it to boil. Now in the skillet, what we're going to do here is we're going to unravel our ground beef. So let's move the onion out of the way, and there's the ground beef. Now Miss Prissy says you can also use ground turkey, but she prefers ground beef, and this is what she uses, so this is what we're going to use. So let's just get that ground beef out of that packaging. Get out of there. Come on. There we go. Perfect log of ground beef. Alright, let's turn the burner on. And we'll just get this thing started by breaking down our log of ground beef. And get that started. Now, while your ground beef is cooking, what we're going to do in the meantime, feel our water, make sure it's not too hot. And those are the mushrooms that we're going to be working with. Yes, this casserole will involve mushrooms. And take a look at this. This was in the refrigerator, and it was in the coldest spot, so all the mushrooms froze together. So I had to leave this out for a while to thaw, and they're still frozen. So what I'm going to do now in the meantime is I'm going to cut up our onion. This is a regular-sized white onion. And believe me, you're going to need a medium-sized onion. It could be a Vidalia, it could be white onion, yellow onion. And we're just going to cut this up into thin strips. And once that's done, we're going to give our ground beef a stir. We're going to brown it completely. And then when it's done browning, we'll go ahead and send it off to drain. And it looks like it's getting to be about the point where it's completely browned. You definitely don't want any pink in there. You want to make sure it's completely browned before you take it off to drain the grease. And what we're going to do is we're going to try to get that grease, as much of that as possible, out of our ground beef. And by doing this, we're going to be pressing the ground beef against the side of the skillet and let all that grease just kind of run down into the bottom of that skillet there. And then once I'm satisfied that enough grease has been removed and enough of the oils have been removed from our beef, we're just going to take as much of that as possible and extract all of the grease and return the ground beef to the burner. And you'll see this here in a moment. As I make sure all the grease is out of my beef. As you can see, that's a lot of grease. And now that the grease has been removed from our ground beef and we're just left with ground beef, we're going to add seasoning. Now the seasoning I'm using is a blend of my own spices, but you can use a taco seasoning, you can use a blend of your own mixes. If you want the recipe for my blend of seasonings, check in the archives section of the Opopits website, you'll find it there. Otherwise you can get a bottle from me. And what we're going to do is we are adding 1 cup of water. And the water is going to help dissolve the seasoning and make it more into a seasoned beef. And now we're going to add about 1/4 cup of that seasoning mix. think, yeah, it might be best if I just took the lid off and just dumped it in, but about a quarter cup, maybe a little less, maybe about a fifth of a cup. I didn't really seem to measure, but it was about a quarter cup. Let's go ahead and give that a stir. And you want to make sure that the seasonings, the water, blend perfectly. You want a nice, even blend. You don't want your seasoning in chunks in various places. You want them to blend in and kind of dissolve. And using the water to help dissolve and also spreads the seasoning to an even consistency. And now we're going to take and get some more of that seasoning in there, which I don't believe I have quite figured out. Okay, now I'm going to take the lid off. Now I'm going to take that shaker lid off. Oh, I know what happened. A bunch of it bunched up over time. That's the problem with some of these seasonings. They'll bunch up over time if you let it sit for long enough. But you just take a long knife, kind of crush it down, and you're good to go again. And so we're going to add a lot more of that seasoning. And in it goes. And that's a good amount of that seasoning mix. What you want to do is just sprinkle enough to where it coats and basically covers the top of your ground beef. Mix that in really good with a cup of water, and we should have some really amazing seasoned ground beef. Now you want to keep stirring until the ground beef kind of absorbs in all of that seasoning. You definitely don't want pieces of your ground beef to not be touched by the seasoning. Now we're going to give that a little swirl. I'm going to set the spoon aside now, and then we're going to continue working on our vegetables. And what we're going to do here is, I'm not ready for the onion yet. Wait, maybe I am. Okay, what we're going to do here is we're going to add the onions once the seasoning has been coated in our ground beef. And before it gets too coated, we're going to add our onions while we still have consistent water. And what's going to happen is, as the onions cook, that water is going to evaporate, and all the seasoning is going to cook right into our mixture of ground beef and white onion. Now please note too, we are using the entire medium white onion here because when onions cook, they tend to shrink in size a bit, so we're going to need that entire onion. And you want to cook these until the onion is at least a little translucent. So we're just adding that whole onion in there, and you can see you got some really generous sized strips, and that's exactly what we want. So once you separate your onion layers into your ground beef, and then we're going to give it a good stir, and make sure that all that seasoning is coated really good with all those onion pieces. I'm going to take that spoon now, and we're going to stir everything together and make sure that the onion absorbs in all of the rest of that seasoning water. You know, that's kind of collecting with the ground beef as it bakes in. And you'll notice that the onions will start to turn a brownish color, and that's exactly what we're looking for. So make sure that the onions are really coated with that seasoning mix. And if there's any, you know, white pieces, just give it a good extra stir. Make sure it's all coated. And this is what it should look like. By the time it's done cooking, that's what it should look like. So we got our ground beef seasoned to perfection, and we also have our onions, which has also been seasoned. And you can tell there's some translucency going on with those onions. And now what we're going to do is break apart these frozen mushroom pieces. They're not supposed to really be frozen, they're supposed to be thawed, but some things can't be helped. And this was a bit of an error on my behalf, but since they're slightly frozen, the extra water should be nice, when it cooks the rest of the way, and all that water kind of melts from the ice in our mushroom. It's going to add a little extra water to our mix in case we didn't add enough. But 1 cup to a quarter cup of seasoning should do the trick, plus all of this ingredients. And we're going to use about a good-sized container full of cut mushrooms. And that looks to be about 20 sliced mushrooms worth. And we're going to add the majority of these mushrooms to our skillet. And come back here. One of them decided to fly away. And we're just going to go ahead and add that into our skillet. This is going to be a very hearty mixture, and one that will be very filling too. So if you're fans of mushrooms and onions, you'll love this recipe. What we're going to do is we're just going to add most of them, give it a good stirring, and then we're going to add the rest of them that are still inside that package. And we are using about 3/4 of the package of mushrooms. Or you can use the entire package. And this is one of the larger sized pre-cut mushrooms that you can find in your produce section of your grocery store. So we're using a 3/4 full of one of those containers of mushrooms. Or you can use the entire thing, but we kind of broke into them a little early, so we had a dish that we wanted to add mushrooms to, and let's just say we dipped into the mushroom supply a bit, so that's why we're only working with 3/4 of a package instead of a full package. Once you got your first run of mushrooms mixed into the seasoning mix and your onions and your ground beef, you can add the rest of them in, but I'm going to wait for a little bit while I cut all of these olives. Now we're using black olives for these, and these, since they're whole olives in a can, we're going to have to slice them up. So, slicing up all of our all of our olive takes a little bit more time to do, but we're not going to cook our olives yet. We're going to keep them off to the side, and I'll show you when we're going to use the black olives. So once we got all of our olives cut, we'll go on to the next step. I'll probably add the rest of those mushrooms. I'd like to point out also that if you add mushrooms after you started cooking some of the mushrooms and you add some more mushrooms later, you get a very interesting mix of well done mushrooms and medium done mushrooms, and it was quite a nice combination actually, so I didn't mind actually adding more mushrooms later and then cooking them less, so you get a different mix of consistency on your mushrooms. We're going to give this another quick stirring. Make sure that everything cooks evenly, nothing is burning. And then I think at this point, I'm just going to grab the rest of the mushrooms and dump them in there. There you go. So there you have it. All the mushrooms are now used up. And of course, stir them in. Now, the water here is boiling, and we forgot to add our noodles earlier, so let's go ahead and do that now. Once your water reaches a boil, you definitely want to add your noodles. And we're using just some regular full box of elbow macaroni noodles. So get those added in. Give them a really good stirring to prevent them from sticking together. And let me get a different spoon for that. Even though all the food will kind of mix together anyhow, but I kind of like to use a separate stirring spoon for the noodles that I used for the ground beef, onions, and mushrooms. Keeps the water clean too. So there you go. Give that a good stirring. And that helps separate all the noodles, and the salt will help break down the starch that collects while the noodles are boiling. Also keeps your boil clean. And we're going to give this mixture here a good stirring as well. And everything looks to be quite nice. Mushrooms are now seasoned in really well. The onions are perfectly seasoned with the ground beef. And all of that water got absorbed in the cooking process to our food. And this is what that will look like after it's done. And doesn't that look delicious? You got big chunks of mushroom in there too. You can definitely taste the mushroom in this recipe. Alright, now that's perfect. Now we're going to turn off the burner on our meat mixture. Kind of give it a swishing to kind of even everything out in the skillet, and we're going to pick up our stirring spoon here and give another stir to our noodles. Now later on, we're going to be adding some shredded cheese, and we're going to need 2 kinds of cheese. There they are. What we're going to be using for this recipe is some good old Italian blend mozzarella cheese, or just plain mozzarella. You can use Italian blend as well. And my favorite, extra sharp cheddar. You can never go wrong with extra sharp cheddar. I like my cheddar cheese with a bite. The sharper the better anyway. And we're also going to be needing a glass Pyrex baking dish. And you see it over there too. There's the Pyrex baking dish. Okay, now what we're going to do here is we're going to preheat our oven to 400 degrees Fahrenheit. It's looking to be getting close to the point where we need to start preheating our oven. Is when halfway into the point where you're boiling, where your noodles are completely cooked, that's when you want to set your oven to 400 degrees. Now while we're waiting for the oven to preheat, we're going to test the consistency of these noodles. And we're just going to grab one. Ooh, hot. And we're just going to test its firmness. Bite into one of them. And just to see how far along we are. You kind of want them just a step above al dente, and that is perfect now. So what we're going to do is we're going to take our noodles over here to the sink. We're going to drain them out right away. And Ms. Prissy recommends that after you drain the noodles, you set them aside while you work on the rest of your ingredients, but you want to stop the cooking process of the noodles. So what we're going to do is after we strain out all of our hot water, and we're going to still have hot noodles once the water is gone. So what we're going to do is we are going to shock our noodles by adding cold water immediately after they come off the oven or the stovetop. But first we're making sure that all the hot water is out of that pan. And now we're going to lay down our bowl and just dump those noodles right into the bowl there. Well, looks like we lost a few off the side, but that's okay. Get all the noodles out of your pan, and now make sure your water is cold when it goes into that bowl. Now what we're going to do is we're going to cool these noodles down by shocking them. Or I guess shock cooling them, which is basically introducing cold water to already hot food that has just been pulled off of the stovetop. And what we're going to do, and don't worry folks, the sink is very clean. So I'm just going to rescue some of those noodles. Now you want to test the water. If the water is still hot, you want to strain it out and re-add cold water back in. So what we're going to do is go ahead and strain out that hot water because those noodles give off a lot of residual heat now. And when you add cold water to it, that water is going to heat right back up again. So we need to get rid of all that hot water. And we need to repeat this process until you're left with a cold water in your noodles. Usually 2 times would be perfect for a full box of noodles. Rinse them through 2 times with very cold water, and that helps shock the noodles into not cooking any further than the point you pull them off the oven or the stovetop. And that is the main purpose of shocking your noodles to cold right after they're cooked. So because we don't want them to cook any further than a touch above al dente. One final rinse, and we should be in the clear. Now, you can choose to leave them in the cold water, but I prefer to drain the cold water out, just leaving the noodles as it is, and all that stickiness will have gone away because we've rinsed it in cold water several times. So you don't have to worry about your noodles sticking anymore. What we really want to do is to make sure the noodles are not cooking anymore. So you can drain off the rest of that cold water and just leave the noodles straight in the bowl. Isn't that a nice isn't that a nice oven mitt? I don't know why I presented that oven mitt. Like, look at my oven mitt. Isn't that cool? It's a fox. Alright, now we have a nice clean pan all over again. Or pot, I should say. And we're going to be using about that size of a jar of tomato sauce. Your favorite spaghetti sauce in a big jar like that would be sufficient. We're using that. We're using a meat sauce. And you need about either 2 regular sized jars or 1 really big sized jar of your favorite spaghetti sauce. And don't worry, you will use it. Okay, once you get all the sauce out of the jar, we can go to the next step. Now, you want to turn the heat on to low and start cooking your sauce. Wait till it starts to bubble, and then you can add that meat mixture over there to the sauce, and that's what we're going to do right about here. I'm going to take our skillet here and just add the meat mixture with all of our vegetables in it, our mushrooms and onions and seasoned ground beef, and we're going to just add that right into the sauce. Okay, now we're going to stir that right in. And to make sure that all of your ingredients mix together, blends together as evenly as possible, keep stirring until you don't see your ingredients. They're well blended into the sauce. That should do it just nicely. Okay. Now for the next step, and all you cheese lovers out there, pay good attention, because this is definitely the best part. Oh yeah, we also have to get out some aluminum foil because we're going to need it later. We're going to grab our melt-away cheese. And we are using about 1/4 of a block of melt-away cheese. Now, since we're cheese lovers, we're using that 1/4 block of melt-away cheese. But you can use 1/2 block. Use as much of that cheese as you want to. There is no real measurement for it. Because if you love your cheese, you'll add more. If you like a little cheesy touch to your sauce, add a little less. But we're adding 1/4 block because that's just about the right size. Just about what we want. Now, it's also best to break apart your melt-away cheese rather than just putting the whole thing in, because the smaller chunks that you put into your sauce, the faster they'll melt. If you put that entire block in there, you're going to wait forever for that thing to melt away. So just break it down into several pieces and scatter them all throughout that sauce there. Now what we're going to do is stir that in and just allow the low heat to sort of blend everything together while melting the cheese. And so we're going to be able to turn this sauce into a nice cheesy sauce. You'll notice that the color of your sauce will turn from a deep red to a lighter shade of red. We don't really want to turn it into a primarily cheesy sauce. We're just using the cheese to enhance the flavor. You'll still get a lot of the qualities of the tomato sauce, like the color and the flavor, but this adds a lot of cheesy, nice, creamy cheese flavor and consistency to your sauce. So once all that is stirred in, and we're going to go ahead and leave this alone for a bit and let the rest of it cook the rest of the way. And when all that cheese is melted, then we're ready for the next step. Alright, now it's time to apply our shredded cheese. We're going to start off with the mozzarella or Italian mix. I think we're just working with straight mozzarella, which is okay too. So we're going to add this to the bottom of the pan. And then on top of the mozzarella, we're going to be adding our sharp cheddar. So that way we have both kinds of cheese at the bottom of our pan. Now make sure that the bottom of the pan is nicely covered with a layer of cheese. You don't want too much down there. Just enough to cover the bottom of the pan with both kinds of cheeses. Pat that in really good. And we're ready for the next step. Why not? Add the rest of that to the sauce. We got another bag. We can never be too cheesy with our sauce. And while we're at it, we'll stir that in real good. Okay. This ought to be some extra cheesy sauce with that. A little extra sharpness. Okay, stir that in really good. You can see that using shredded cheese melts faster than the melt-away cheese. We still have big chunks of that melt-away cheese in there, so... a little bit more, a little bit longer won't hurt it. Our next step is to add our noodles. So right on top of the cheese, we're going to add our cooled down noodles. And we're just going to layer that on And we're probably going to be using the entire bowl. Now, it may seem like your baking dish will be filling up very quickly, and it sure will. Look at all those noodles. So just kind of spread them out, even up the layers. And now we're on the top of this, we're going to add our black olives that we sliced. This is a full can's worth of black olives, but use as little or as much as you like. If you love black olives, then use a bigger can, or 2 small cans. Now spread them evenly over the top. Make sure that you don't get too many olives in one bite and not enough in another. You want to kind of spread them out. That should be good. Pat it all down. And now we're ready for the layer of sauce. So we're just going to spoon the sauce over the top of the layer. And Ms. Prissy says it may seem like you're running out of room on the top when you add your sauce, but this is normal for a dish like this. You can use a bigger dish if you want, but this one will suffice if this is all you have. So just keep adding as much sauce as you can across the top of the very top layer there. Making sure to spread evenly all of your sauce across the top. You don't want to leave anything uncovered. And you're going to have some sauce left over, and I'm going to show you what to do with that extra sauce. And there you have it. Now we're going to reach for our cheese, and we're going to put some more cheese on the top layer now. We're going to do what we did last time and start off with the mozzarella. And we're just going to evenly place cheese over the top. Now for the top layer, you might want to put a little more cheese than you put on the bottom layer, because this is where the cheesiness really comes into play right here. We want to make sure to cover the entire top of your casserole with cheese. That way when it melts, it holds all your ingredients together. Now topping the rest of that with that new bag of extra sharp cheddar cheese. Gonna use the rest of that bag there. And, oh, here we go. More cheddar cheese. All right. Must have had some left over in that other bag. But the more cheese, the better. So pile that stuff right on the top there. You might need to use your hand to make sure that all the cheese stays on the top and doesn't shake out onto the counter. By this time, your pan will be extremely full and probably running over the top. So that's why we really need to pile on the cheese to hold everything together, make sure stuff don't leak out over the sides. There you have it. Now, for our final step before baking, we're going to cover this really tightly with aluminum foil. You want to make sure that you cover it tight, and just as an extra added measure, in the oven, you want to put this on the top shelf. On the bottom shelf, you want to put a baking sheet or something to catch any drippings. So this will help keep your oven clean and ensure that whatever leaks out of your pan, if at all, won't be cooking itself straight onto your oven. This cheese is very hard to get out of an oven once it dribbles all over the place. So you want to make sure that you take every precaution necessary to keep your cooking clean. And to make sure that that is very tightly on, and which it is. Now we're just going to gather up and see just how much sauce we got left, and we're going to be baking this for approximately 20 to 30 minutes, or until the cheese is melted. Now since you're working with cold noodles, you're going to need to leave them in for a little extra, so I figure about 25 to 30 should do it. When you start smelling that casserole, that's when you know it's ready to come out of there. And 30 minutes later, you got yourself one beautiful looking casserole. Not one single bit of it leaked out. And all the cheese is melted, and as you can see, looks divine. I really can't wait to get into this. So what we're going to do here with that extra sauce, what I showed you, if you have some extra sauce, lay a layer of it down onto your plate. And by doing so, you get yourself some extra sauce that you didn't get to put over the top of your casserole. So you get the best of the top and the bottom coated with your sauce. And now we're going to dip right in, and we're going to just take a good square of our casserole and just dish it up. Now you want to be careful when you start serving it, because those noodles are going to be very loose and actually might spill out over the sides of your baking pan or baking dish. But look at that. Nice and cheesy. Look at that cheese coming off of that. Look at that stringy cheese there. That's one thing about working with mozzarella. That's the stringiest cheese you'll ever work with right there, folks. So serve it up on a bed of spaghetti sauce, of your leftover sauce there. And get ready to serve one delicious meal to your family, to your friends. And the beauty part about this casserole, it's very filling, it goes a long way, and you'll have plenty leftovers. And there you have it. Let's get a close-up shot of this. That's what it looks like when it's done, folks. That is Ms. Prissy's Baked Macaroni Casserole. And we're going to give it a taste test right here. God, my hair is a mess. Looks like I stuck my fingers in a light socket. What happened to my hair? But anyway, I don't care. I'm hungry. I want food now. And judging from my expression, I like it. And you'll probably like it too. So follow this recipe at home. And that's about all we have time for Cooking with SonicBlu. I'd like to thank everybody for tuning in and watching. And remember, if you're not cooking good, you're not eating good.